All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to the webinar, the Simplex-IT webinar. And today's topic is going to be how to work with queries and how to create reports. So the chat window, if you're having any problems, you can use the chat window to ask if you need support. There's also, you can either email support at Simplex-IT or call 234-380-1277. And therefore you can, if you're having any problems, someone's monitoring. I'm going to have you hold your questions until the end of the session. The session is going to be posted on YouTube, so there's a lot of information to get through. So I would like to get through that information. But at the end, if you have any question, I would be glad to answer those questions at the end. I won't be monitoring the chat window during the session. The new services from Simplex-IT are Simplex DBA and for databases, and Simplex PM for project managers for Microsoft Project and training and tools. And so we are going to have some webinars coming up. Today's webinar, we have Keeping Corporate Data Healthy. So if you are, this is about access, and if you want to learn more about data, these are going to be great webinars for you to also attend if you work with a lot of databases. We're going to have one on April 16th using project sites, one on April 28th, turning data into information. So you can see by the D stands for the corporate data webinars, the P stands for project management webinars, and the O stands for office webinars. And the next webinar is going to be Excel VLOOKUPs and working with some formulas and tracking in Excel. We're also offering 2-hour web sessions with me. You pick the topics and I can cover it. So let's say you want to learn more about pivot tables, or you want to learn more about Outlook, or you have a question with something. We can go ahead and do a specialized training for a group of people in your company if you want. So if you're interested, please contact Bob at simplexit.com. And finally, we will be awarding a free copy of Microsoft Windows 8.1 to one attendee from today's session. I will ask a question at the end of the session today, and if whoever writes in the answer will win, and then they will contact you and get it sent to you. So let's go ahead and start today's session. So today we're talking about access, queries, and filters. So I'm going to start out with filters first, and then we'll move into queries. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the customer table. And last session, we learned how to create tables in Access, how to create property settings, get the data entered into Access, setting it up, and all of that. So building your databases, and also creating the relationship between your tables. So, you know, sometimes when you're in a table, you want information quickly. So the benefit of filters is the fact that you do not have to create a query to find out the information. And what queries do is they ask questions. They're really the heart of Access. So, but if I'm in a table and I want to know something, I can click on the little drop-down arrow to the right of each of the little fields, just like in Excel. And then if I want, I can just go ahead and find what I'm looking for and filter it down to what I need. And then I can print that if I need to, or if I'm just looking for information, then I can do that. You can click on the little funnel, clear the filter if you want. Depending on the type of information that's in there, if you click on the drop-down arrow, this one knows it's text, so I can say, you know, does not contain, and if I want, I can say does not contain Texas, and hit OK, and it also eliminates Texas from my database, or my table. Now, the other way down below, let's say that you are, you know, filtering now city, and so now you want to filter, you know, Atlanta, so now I'm down to 3 records. Down below in the record navigation screen, down below in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see the filtered button. So it's telling you your table is filtered. And when you click on it, it unfilters that table. Now, another thing that they have over here on the in this section over here on the home ribbon, because you're in a table, there is a little sorting and filtering section here, and one of the buttons is toggle filter. What that does when you click on it, it remembers the very last filter that you did in your table. So if you go, gee, I want to bring up that information again, you can click on it and bring it up. The thing is, though, if you close the table, and it's going to ask you, do you want to save changes? And you're thinking that when you open it back up, it's still going to be filtered. Not the case, because now if I open it back up, I'm getting all the information. Now, so the thing about filters is they're not permanent. They're just a quick way of going in and finding information in a table. Now, under Advanced, I'm going to go ahead and hit the Clear All Filters. And notice that the toggle filter then grays out. So if there was any filters that were still there, remember, it remembers the very last filter, even if you close it and open it up, and it's grayed out, so I can't use it anymore. But I'm going to go to the Advanced Filter button and do Filter by Form, because what this allows me to do is it allows me to go in and create an OR statement filter, meaning that I can click on a state, and then I can click down here where it says OR, and maybe go to city and click on a city. So now I'm looking for Florida or Boston. So now if I hit the toggle filter button, I'm getting Florida or I'm getting Boston. So now I have this filter that I can use, and down below it tells me this is filtered. Now, if I click on that to clear it up, I can still click on the toggle filter button to bring it back. So I can use that to bring back the last filter that I used. The other thing I can do under Advanced is I could save this as a query. So I'm going to go to the Advanced Filter Sort, and it'll bring up the query wizard window, which we will look at later, and you can see that I've got Florida or Boston, and we'll talk about this in a minute. And then I'm going to close this. I'm going to save this. I'm going to right click on it and hit save, and I'm going to call it Boston or Florida query. I don't have to do query, but I'm going to say query, and now it's going to be stored right here in the query grid. So if I close this and bring back all of my information, which I'm going to just hit the filtered button and bring it all back, I still have that query here. So if I double click on it, then I have that query that I just saved. So the filter I saved it as a query. And when we get to queries, we'll talk more about those. But it's nice because I can use that later if I want. Now, the other thing too, over on the left in the navigation pane, we talked about this last time, was that if you click on the drop-down arrow, I have it filtered by, I have it set by object type, and then I have it all access objects. So what that does is it allows me to see the tables, the queries, the forms, and the reports, all on the left, so that I can just quickly get to the ones I want to get to. All right. So now if I hit the toggle filter, remember, it's still remembering the last one that I did, but it's not permanent, because if I close the table and open it back up, then everything is back to the way it was. So that's just a little, and then you also have your filter by selection, where you can actually select a portion of the information in your table, right click, and then say, contains roads. So I get everything that has, on the address that's a road. And then I could go over here and I could right click on Tennessee and say equals Tennessee. So now by, right clicking and selecting parts of the information that's in my table, I can filter those. And then I can hit the filtered button and clear that out. So, and it just seems to think you're changing the structure of the table, but you're not. So you'll notice here I brought up an orders table. So if I wanted, just the 14th of the, and I could say ends with 14th. I don't know why that didn't pick it up. Let's go over here. It says equals Orlando. So here I can do the filter by selection too. So You know, it's filtering. It's not like I said, it's not permanent, but it's a nice way to get information quickly if you're in a table. So now I'm going to go and get into queries. And queries are advanced filters. They are a way to get the information. You're building queries, you're pulling fields. You can pull fields from one table, multiple tables, if they're related. And then we can do things like pop-up box queries, parameter queries is what they're called. We're going to look at doing calculations in a query. We're going to look at some quick reports when you want to print the information that you've created. Look at some criteria functions. So let's get into those. So on the Create ribbon, there's two ways to create a query. Query Wizard, which is my favorite, and Query Design. I'm going to do two with the Query Wizard, then we're going to do one with Query Design, and then we're going to get into some other types of queries. So I'm going to click on the Query Wizard, and the one we're going to choose first is a simple Query Wizard. At the end of the session, we'll be looking at the other three wizards, the Crosstab, the Find Duplicates, and the Unmatched. So the simple Query Wizard, I'm going to click OK. And then I'm going to pull fields from one table. So here in the tables drop down, I'm going to click on the employees table, and I'm going to pull over the fields that I want. I may not want everything. I just want a query because I want to find information about my employee, the department, their salary. So I'm going to send over last name by double clicking, first name. You can use the single arrow. If you use the double arrow, it sends all the fields to the right. I'm going to choose date hired, department. Now, if for some reason they're not in the order that you want and you change your mind, you can always move them. You can't move them here, but you can move them in the query grid. If you made a mistake and you want to send them all back to the left, just hit the double arrow, and then you can then start over. So last name, department, date hired, and I'm going to pull over salary. I'm going to hit next. It's going to show me all my employees. I'm going to hit next. I'm going to call it employee salary info. Now, a lot of times, again, if you don't want to use spacing in the actual naming of the tables or the queries, you can do that too. You can use underscores, and then if it's a query, a lot of times the developers would say, you know, QSEL or table TBL or whatever it is. But Access is going to know it's a query. It's going to put it in the queries section. So I'm going to hit finish, and now I have my query. So you can see that if I want to, you know, size my columns, I can just double click. And remember that I have these here because I have the captions. So in the field names, I don't like using spaces, but I created a caption, and we talked about that last time. So I have this little query here. Down below, it tells me I have, you know, 20 records, and I have this information here. Now, a lot of times, let's say I'm going to change John Doe's salary to $95,000. Now, I made that change. Does it affect the table? Well, here's where a lot of people get confused. They think that when they change it here, it's not affecting the table. Well, this information only exists because of the table. So if I close this query and save it and go and open up the employee table, it did change it. So if you look at John Doe's salary, yes. So if I change it here and run the query, the changes will show up. If I change the query and then open the table, yes, it affects the table. So the only reason the information exists in the first place in the query is because of the table. If there was no data in the table, there'd be no data here. So you just have to remember, all things lead back to the table. The table is the holding cell. That's where all the information is stored. So now we're going to go back into Design View. I'm going to right-click and go into Design View of the query. So right up here we have the table that the fields are coming from. Down below, I have the fields that I selected. If I wanted to add a field, let's say I wanted to add the state field, I could, because I used the wizard and you change your mind later, you can still add fields. So if I want to, I could double click on state. It's going to put it at the end of the grid down below. If you want to move it, you just click on the little gray bar above it, and then you point to it with your white arrow, and you drag it wherever you want to put that field. So if you want to put it to the left of salary, you can. If you want to delete it, you just select that column and hit your delete key. It doesn't matter. You don't have to. You're not deleting the field. You're just deleting it from the query. Now, if you want, you can also take it and drag it. If you drag it on top of a column, it'll put it to the left of that column, so that when you run the query and on the ribbon, you'll see there's a red Run button. Or if you want, you can just go to View and go to Datasheet View, either way. But when you run the query, you'll see the state column is right there. So by going back into Design View, this is the Design View button here. You can click on that, and then I can delete that if I want to. The other thing is you may not want to remove a field from the query, so maybe you want to just hide it and then print it. So maybe you want to hide the salary field, so you click the remove the check mark from the Show Hide box, and then you run the query. So now I have the information I need. So if I wanted to, I could actually print this and just do a quick, print of the spreadsheet, and then I wouldn't see the salary information. And then all I have to do when I go back into Design View is just recheck that box. So if you want to hide a field and run it, then you can. On the sort line, if you want to do a permanent sort by either last name or by department, you just click on ascending or descending, you run the query, and you can see that I have them all grouped by department. And if you want, you can do that too. So you can sort and do like a permanent sort if you want for fields. Then down below, I'm going to run this query. I'm going to go back here. You will also have the totals button on the home ribbon in the query like you did with a table. So if you wanted to total the salary column, you just hit the total button, you go underneath this salary column, you just skip a row, and then you choose whether you want the sum, the average, and basically you would have that information. And so you could do that. You could total the column, and then in a little bit I'll show you how to do a calculated field in a query where we add another field that actually does calculations. So I'm going to go back into Design View. Now I'm going to get into some criteria, talking about criteria. So if I want to filter this, I'm going to type sales north, -north. And if I run the query, now I just have the sales north group. If I go back into Design View and go on the same line, the same criteria line underneath salary, I'm going to do greater than or equal to 100,000. Now I don't have to put in the comma, so I'm going to run it, and I should be down to 1 record. So when I go back into Design View, I said either sales north and they have to make more than 100,000. When I put the criteria on the same line, I'm creating an and statement. If I take this and move this greater than 100,000 down to the next row, which is on the or line, I'm creating an or statement. So it means only one of these statements has to be true. So sales north or greater than or equal to 100,000. So now when I run it, you can see that I have some other one. I have an east here because he makes over 100,000. So it is one or the other. So that's how I can create an or statement between different fields in my query. Now, if I want to, I'm going to close this, and then it says, do you want to save changes? I'm going to say yes. So the thing about a query now is if I open it up, it keeps that filter, that criteria, because I didn't clear it out of the query grid. So therefore, it's permanent. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to close this, and I'm going to go to the Create ribbon, and I'm going to build a report real quickly. I'm going to use the report wizard now, and then later I'll show you the report. I'm going to hit the report wizard, and I have the query that I want to create the report off of selected. I'm going to hit the report wizard. And then I'm going to send all the fields to the right, hit next. Now, because I may want to group these by department, I'm going to double click on the department field so that they're going to be grouped by the department they work in. Hit next. I may want to sort in last name. I'm not going to do any summary options right now. I can do that later. I'm going to hit next. finish, just to build a quick report. Now, as you can see, I'm in the report view, and if I wanted to, I could send this to the printer. I'm actually in print preview, and then I can close print preview, which would take me to design view. I'm going to click way over here on the left and go to, there's all these different views now. You've got report view, which shows you what it looks like. You've got print preview when you're ready to print it. And then you have this view called design view, where you really get in here and work with this. And I'm not covering that today. And like we mentioned before, if you really need some access training, we would be glad to come out and help you with that. But I'm going to go to layout view. And what I like about the layout view is the fact that you can actually see the data. And if you want, you can kind of, move the fields over. You can move them, like drag them if you need to, and change them. And then like I can take it and just kind of drag it over a little bit. In the past, it was really hard to work with reports because you never knew if things were lining up right. And now you can tell that, I'm actually able to move these and align them so that they look good, so that when I print, I can see that everything's going to look well. So now you can see that I have everything here. I'm going to close the report. I'm going to save it. And now I have the employee salary info report now on the report section. I'm going to go back into the query in design view, and I'm going to take out the criteria. Let's say that I take out the criteria now. I run the query, shows me everything, and then I'm going to go back and close it. So now when I run the report, I get everything. And notice that I have it grouped by department now. And another thing I can do, if I go into what's called design view, I can click on, now what they did, what I like about the wizard is it gives you a header. It puts your labels in the page header section. So it actually moved the labels there. It put the actual, because I was grouping by department, it created a department header. And then in the detail section, I have the actual field name, so I can actually size them here. And then it gave me the current date and page number, instead of me building all this from scratch. If I click on the salary field in the detail area and go to the format tab, then you can see there's a conditional formatting button here, and I can hit new rule. So show formatting rules for salary. I'm going to do just a quick rule that says greater than or equal to 100,000, and I'm going to make it bold and red so you can see it. And I'm going to hit, and maybe I'll shade it yellow. I'll hit OK. Okay, and now when I go in and go to report view or print preview, you can see that it actually is highlighting anything that's over 100,000 in my report. So you can apply the conditional formatting to a field in a report for when you print it. So that's kind of a nice feature too. So anytime you put criteria in that query and you run the report, then that's what you're going to see. You're only going to see the information. If you don't have any criteria, you see everything. So I'm going to close this, save it, go back to the create ribbon now, and now I'm going to do another query. So I'm going to do the query wizard, but this time I'm going to use fields from multiple tables. So I'm going to click OK. I'm going to choose the employee table first and send over last name, first name. Then I'm going to go to the customer table and pull over business, contact, and phone and hit next. If the tables were not related and I hit next, I would not get to this screen. I would get an error message saying the tables are not related. You need to go to the relationship window and build the relationship between the tables. So that's why I like the query wizard, because if you forgot to create a relationship, then it would tell you that. So if I hit next, and I'm going to call this employee customers, and I'm going to hit finish. So now I have this query where I have the employees, which may show multiple times because they have multiple customers. I have their customer, their name, and their phone number. Down below in the navigation box, it says I have 52 records. I'm going to go into design view and see, now you can see that these are the two tables that the query, the information's coming from. And it tells you here, table, the table that the fields are coming from. And then I can see that the employee ID in the employee tables is linked to the employee ID in the customer table. That is why I'm able to do the query. But I'm going to double click on the line that's joining the two tables to talk about the join properties. When you create a query using multiple tables, it goes to number one, which means it's only including the rows where the joined fields from the both tables are equal. That means in this case that it is only showing me employees that have customers and customers that have sales reps. And you're saying, okay, so what does that mean? Well, let's go to number two. The number two is called a left outer join, meaning that I want to see all the records from the employees. I want to see all the employees from the employee table, whether they have customers or not. So if I choose number two and hit OK, and then run the query, you will notice down below now I have 56 records. Before I had 52. I'm going to scroll down and you're going to see why. I have 3 employees that do not have any customers assigned to them. Maybe they're managers. Maybe you have an orders table and you want to see customers who haven't placed orders. So you have to be aware that when you are pulling fields from multiple tables, you may not be seeing all the records from both tables. It just depends. It depends on what you're looking for, and it has to be, in this case, we had to have employees who had customers. So now I'm going to go back into design view and click on that arrow again, that join line, and look at number 3. Now number 3 is going to include all the records from the customer table, whether they have an employee assigned to them or not. So I'm going to hit OK, I'm going to run it, and now you can see that I have 53 records, because if I look at the top one, this person doesn't have an employee assigned to them. Maybe they're a new customer, maybe they don't, are no longer a customer, so, so therefore they don't have anybody assigned to them. So they didn't show up the last time when I ran the query. So I just wanted you to be aware of query joins, because what you're looking at, a lot of people assume that they're looking at everything. Now, when you run a query off of one table, you're always looking at everything. But when you're mixing multiple tables together, then you're not looking at everything. So just so you're aware of that, those are called the join properties. Now, some other things that you can do with your, I'm just going to go in here. And look, I'm going to go to the criteria line now, and I'm going to do a less than and greater than symbol. And then that means does not equal. That excludes someone. So if I type Reynolds and I want to exclude him, then I'm going to run it, and then you can see that it leaves Reynolds off of my list. And I go back, and I can take that out. If I'm looking for businesses that have the word golf in them, so I type golf and run it, you're going to notice that I don't get anything. And the reason being is I have to use what are called wildcards, and that would be an asterisk. And an asterisk, real quick, if I bring this up, is if you notice that when you're working with an asterisk, it's a undo automatic. It's a series of characters. So for instance, if you're doing like asterisk books, you would get things with textbooks, cookbooks, workbooks. You don't care what comes before the word books as long as it ends with books. Or maybe P asterisk T. So things like product, putt, talking about golf, hat. So begins with P, ends with T. I don't care how many characters come in between. Sometimes people use a question mark, and that's a single character. So things like 2 question mark would be like 20, 29, 2A, 2B, but it would not be 200 because that would be more than one character. So I could do 2 question mark, or you could use those in dates a lot of times. So that's kind of like what you do with your wildcards. So for the business, if I put the asterisk in front of the word golf and then ran it, I would only get businesses that end with golf. And if I put the asterisk after the word golf, I would only get businesses that start with golf. So if I want to include all the businesses, I would put an asterisk in front of and after the word. Now when I run it, I get all the businesses that have the word golf in them. And when you go back into design view, you'll see that it puts the word like in there and it puts the quotes around the fields. And so a lot of times now with Access is if you, you know, it'll do things for you. Like in the past, you had to type the word like, and, you know, you had to do things like that. So now you don't, it puts it in for you. So, which is nice. All right, so I am going to close this query, save it. And now I'm going to create a query using the query design, doing it from scratch. So I'm going to hit query design. I'm going to go and choose the product categories. Now in this case, when you're using the design, you need to know where the fields are in the tables that you want. So in this case, the show table button has come up, and I'm going to double click on product categories, product list, and suppliers. And then I'm going to close it. Now, I can bring this up, I can move these down if I need to, drag them down if you want. In this case, what you're going to notice is I have 3 tables. The product category table is linked to product list, and suppliers is linked to product list. Even though product categories and suppliers are not linked directly together, the product list table is the junction table that we talked about last time, which means it's joining these 2 tables together, therefore I can use them in a query. So then if I wanted to add another table, I can hit the show table button and bring that up. If you don't need that table to be in the query, you don't want it here, so just delete it, select it, and hit your delete key. I'm going to double click on category name. I'm going to double click on product name. Notice how it puts it in each of the, the columns. I'm going to double click on supplier name, then unit price, units in stock, and when I run my query, I get everything. So you can see that I have my category, on my item, I have my supplier, I have my unit price, and my units in stock field. I'm going to go back into the view ribbon, and one of the things I'm going to do on the criteria line under unit price is I'm going to use the between function. So I'm going to type between, I'm going to put 40 and 80. So here's the nice thing about between. Instead of typing greater than or equal to 40 and less than or equal to 80, I don't have to do that. If I use the word between, and I can use between with text, numbers, dates, I'm going to run this and notice that I have between 40 and 80, which means it also includes 80. So I don't have to do the greater than or less than and equal to sign. The between will work. So when I go back here, let's say I want to say between 60 and 80. So I do 60 and 80 and run it, and that's what I get, between $60 and $80. I don't have to use the dollar sign. It knows that I'm in the unit price column. Therefore, I can use that. So that's a nice way. The other thing I wanted to mention with the view, if you go to the SQL view and you want the, developer, you want the SQL statement, that's all here. When you click on it, you can highlight that, copy it, paste it wherever you want to. But we're working strictly in design view because it's more user-friendly that way. All right, so if I wanted this now, if I wanted to, I could close this. Well, notice that I didn't, when I created the query in design view, I didn't save the name of it. So it's asking me, do I want to save this? I'm going to hit yes, and I'm going to call this product orders. So now I have a product orders query. And if I want to build a report off of this, I go to create, I'm going to hit the report button. And I'm going to click on that. Don't worry about, I don't know why that came out, but that's no big deal. Notice that I'm in the layout view. So again, if I need to, I can quickly click on this to size the columns so that I know that everything's going to print on one page, and I can stretch that out if I need to. And that's that total. So I'm going to close it. And yes, I'm going to save it as product orders. And then I'm going to go back into design view for this, and I'm going to take out my And the other thing I wanted to talk about under units in stock, if you want to do a string of ors, this is the formula for that. You type the word in parenthesis, then I'm going to do 30, 60, 90, close parenthesis, which what that's going to do when I run it is give me, it's an or statement. It's saying 30 or 60 or 90. So if you can see, that's all I have under units in stock. And now and that's instead of going 30 or 60 or 90 or, you use this formula to do a string of ors. I'm going to take that. All right. So let's say that you want to create a query and every time you open it, you want specific information, and you don't want to always have to put in the criteria, close and save the query, then go to the report and run it, and then go back to the query again, take the criteria out, change the criteria, and then run the report again. You can do what's called a parameter query. So I'm going to go to the criteria line under category name. I'm going to right click and go to zoom. And by bringing this up, you're going to be able to see this better. I'm going to go ahead and increase the font size here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a bracket. It's a plain bracket, and type enter category name. Now, you can type whatever text you want to appear in. I am creating a pop-up box. By doing that, I'm putting the text in plain brackets. You can type whatever text you want in between those plain brackets. That is going to be the text that appears when the pop-up box shows up. So when I hit OK and run the query, I get my pop-up. So I have to know the categories of items that I sell, so I'm going to type golf clubs. When I do that, I just get golf clubs. So every time I run the query, I'm going to get that pop-up. I'm going to close and save this. And I'm going to run the report that was based off of that. So when I run it, I get the pop-up. So now, if I type golf balls, why that date and time is coming up. Oh, because of the report, it's looking, forget that. So anyways, you can see that I've got the golf balls. And if I wanted to, I could take that out. I'm going to go into design view and take that out so I don't get this pop-up interfering with my, so now I'm going to do golf clubs. There you go. Every time I run the report, I type the item that I'm looking for. Now, I can also do multiple pop-ups. So I'm going to close this. I'm going to go into that. Now, I'm going to go right to design view for product orders. Otherwise, if I double click on it, the pop-up comes up. So underneath units in stock, unit price. Let's go to unit price. And I'll bring up the zoom box. I can do Shift F2 also. And in parentheses, well, no, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do between. Remember the between function. And in brackets, I'm going to type first value in brackets and second value. So now I'm going to get, I'm going to actually get three pop-ups. I'm going to get the category and then the first value. So let's say I want pricing between, say, 40 and 80 like we did last time under unit price. So run it. I'm going to say golf clubs. First value is going to be 40. Second value is going to be 80. There you go. So now I have golf clubs between 40 and 80. So now when I run the report, same thing. I'm going to type golf balls between 10 and 2 items. So now when I go back to my query, that's a parameter query. So you could make a copy of this and you could have one to just enter criteria, and then you can have one that comes up with the pop-ups so that every time you run the report, you just get what you're looking for. Another type of pop-up that you can create is called a wildcard parameter. So I'm going to right click and bring up the zoom window for the one that said enter category name, and I'm going to type the word like in front of it. And after the second bracket, excuse me, I'm going to do an ampersand sign and an asterisk. Asterisk is the wild card. So whatever parameter query you're creating, put the word like in front of it, use that and sign and the asterisk after it, and then when you run it, what's nice about it is you can only put part of the word in. So if you type the word golf, I'm going to get golf clubs and golf balls. If I went and ran it and I typed, SH, then I get shoes. I only have to type part. The more you type, say for instance, last name, you type Richards. So you get Richards, but then if you go Richardson, you would get Richardson. You get Richards and Richardson. The more you type, the more that's going to come up. So what's nice about a parameter is you don't have to be exact. A wildcard parameter, because in a regular parameter, you have to type the information exactly, or you won't get the information that you want. So those are the two types of parameter queries that you can create, which is nice. Now, we're going to talk about calculations. So I want to do a calculation after unit price, units in stock, called total unit cost. And I wanted to take this field and this field and multiply them. So I'm going to create a new field. Now, we talked about calculations in a table, but now I want to do calculations in a query. So I'm going to right-click on the field line because I'm creating a new field. And I'm going to bring up the zoom box. And the first thing I'm going to do is type the name of my column, my field name. So I'm going to type total unit cost. And remember, we talked about the benefits of not using spaces in field names. Then I'm going to type a colon. So this is going to be the name of the field. The colon is then going to separate the field name from the actual formula. I'm going to kind of move this over. My formula is going to be, and I'm not using the builder right now, I'm just typing it out. It's going to be unit price, so I tend to make sure you're spelling it correctly or you will have a problem, times units in stock. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to run the query, and there you go. I have my, now if I want to take the decimals out or fix the label at the top, I can do that in the property setting, which I'll show you in a minute. Now be aware though, if I change the units in stock here to 80, okay, it will calculate, but remember this is changing in the table. This field doesn't exist in the table, but this field does. So if I change to here and I open the table, it's going to say 80 next to this item. Now, I'm going to go back into, and if you remember, we have the totals button up here. So if I wanted to total multiple columns now, so I could do that. I could go over here and total it if I want. I could total this if I want. And so now I have a total. I can total the whole column, and I created a new field. Go back into Design View. And now if I right-click, I can go to Properties, where there's a Property Sheet button up here. But it brings up the property box for the field. So now, if I wanted to, I could put in a caption. Remember, captions will replace the field name. Oh, I'm sorry, total unit cost. And if I wanted to take out the decimals, I could go to, sorry, I'm losing my mouse here, and choose 0. So now when I run it, I have total unit cost up here, and I have, now if you did this in the table, these would have came up with the spacing, but I didn't put captions in the table so they didn't come up, and I could do it in the query if I want. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention too is when I right click and bring up the zoom window, one of the things you're going to notice is it put brackets around the field names, even though I didn't type the brackets. So if you remember, I said, if you, in the last session, I mentioned that when you're not using spaces in your field names, it helps because then when you type out the field name, Access will put brackets in for you. If I had spaces in the field names when I created it, I would have to manually type those brackets in. So here's an example of where it's beneficial not to put spacing in the field names and to use captions. All right, I'm going to save this. Now, I'm going to make a copy of this product orders table because I actually want to do a grouping. So I'm going to right-click on product orders and hit copy, and then I'm going to right-click and do paste. And then it's going to bring up and I'm going to call this category totals. And I'm going to open up category totals, and I'm going to go into design view. And what I want to do here is I want to group my golf clubs together and get the total unit cost. I could leave all three up, or I just want to get this and what the total unit cost is for the items, but they need to be grouped together. So I need to get rid of fields that are prohibiting me from grouping the information together. That would be product name, supplier. And so that's why I made a copy of that so that I wouldn't mess this one up. So I'm going to go into design view. I'm going to take out all four of these fields. So I'm going to highlight them, hit my delete key. Now, if I run it, you can see it's still separated. It's still, I don't have the golf clubs together. I don't have the golf bags together. So what I'm going to do is go back into design view, and up here, I'm going to click on the totals button. So this totals button is a grouping button. It's not what you think of like in Excel, like auto sum. It's a grouping button. So when I click on it, it says group by category. And over here, because this is total unit cost, I'm going to do sum. So watch what happens when I run it. Now I have the golf bags, their total unit cost, golf balls, total unit cost. So now they are totally grouped together. I have the total here, and then I have a total of everything at the bottom because I have the little totals button selected on the ribbon. So if I wanted to, group my employees by department in that query, I would, go into, oops, I closed it. When I go into design view, I would group by department, take out first name, last name, date hired, keep salary. In a minute, we're going to add a bonus field and some other calculations in this particular query. So that's a great way to group items together. Now, I'm going to close this, and I'm going to close this for now. And I'm going to go to the product orders table, and I'm going to go into design view. And another feature they have is this return here, where if I want to find like the top 5 or 5%, I can click on that and then run it. And then it would show me, and you can actually type whatever you want in here. So like if you want 12%, you just type it in and, hit enter and then hit run. And that's what it would give you. So you can do percentages, you can do top 5 or 10 or whatever you want to type in here. What you have to be aware of, though, is when you run it, it doesn't tell you down below that this is filtered. So I've had people in the past who forget to change this to all to make sure that they're seeing all of the records. So if you do use this return box here, make sure that you set it back to all when you're done, because every time you run it or you run a report, you're just going to get what is in that box. So that's called like they call that the top values box. All right, so now I'm going to bring up and if this goes a little over, if you can hang on a little bit, because there's a couple other queries I want to show you, but I'm going to go back into the employee salary query. And what I want to do is I want to create a bonus field. So I'm going to right click, go to field, zoom, and I'm going to type the word bonus, colon, and then it's going to be the salary field, which is one word, so I don't have to worry about brackets, times 0.05, so 5%, and hit OK, and I'm going to run it. Now, if you notice on this one, it didn't give me the currency format. So sometimes when you do fields, like before I did 2 fields and then, I got the dollar signs, but sometimes you don't. So if that happens, just go back into design view on the field, on the property sheet, just go to format, choose currency. If you want to take out the decimals, go ahead, and then when you run it, there you go. And then since I have the total running, I can go here and bring up the sum for the bonuses, and there you go. Now the other thing I can do too is I'm going to insert a column to the left of salary. So I'm going to go up here and hit the insert column button, and I'm going to create a field called service years, or years of service, or whatever you want to call it. And this one is going to be the following formula. It's going to be a parenthesis now. Looks like a sad face, doesn't it, right there? And then it's today's date minus, and then I'm going to click here where it says EMP. So take their date hired, close parenthesis, divided by 365, because there's 365 days in a year, so I'm going to hit OK. And when I run it, I'm going to get this big, long number. So I'm going to fix that. I'm going to go into Design View, and on the format here, I'm going to choose Fixed, and then I'm going to choose 1. So then if I run it, you can see that I have, 13 years, 3 months, 3 years, 3 months, 1 year, 1 month. So basically you have, how many years they've worked with the company. So if you want to run your report, or you want to create your report, then you have that information there. Now, I also want to combine the last name and the first name columns so they're all in one column instead of 2. So I'm going to delete these 2 columns, last name, first name. I'm going to insert a column to the left of department, and I'm going to create a new field that's a concatenated field. So I'm going to right-click on field, go to Zoom, call this employee, colon, and then I'm going to concatenate them. So I got to look in the field list here to make sure I'm spelling the fields correctly. So I'm going to go, now depending on if you want to go last name, first name, if you want to sort, you probably want to do last name, first name. So I'm going to type EMP, last name, then an and sign and a quote, comma, because I'm doing last name, first name. If I was doing first name, last name, I wouldn't need the comma. Space, because you want a space between the names. Then I'm going to reverse it. Quote, and sign. Then I'm going to type employee first name. Now when I hit OK and run it, now I have an employee name column. So you can see, and if I go back and I want to sort them, I can go to the sort line and choose ascending. So when I run it, they're in alphabetical order. I have their department, I have their date, I have years of service, etc. So you can see that. Now, also up here, if you don't want the alternating rows to be shaded, there is on the formatting ribbon, there is a button here that you can turn off that alternating shading if you don't like it. If it doesn't bother you, then it's automatic for some reason. They have it turned on automatically. So now if I go back into Design View, you can see if I right-click on the field and go to Zoom, again, notice that it put the brackets around the field names because I didn't have spaces. So again, there's another example of when you're working with formulas and you're creating formulas and calculations and doing concatenation in a query, then you have this, it does the brackets for you. So now if I close this and I run my report, oh, remember, because I know what happened here. I'm going to have to do a new report because what I did, now you can delete things. So remember, I got rid of the first name and the last name fields. They don't exist anymore. So I'm going to select this, go to create, and just hit the report button to run it. And then I can quickly size the columns if I need to, just so that when they print, I can just clicking. I love this layout feature because it's so great. You can quickly format the report now without having to fully go into Design View. Now, I'm going to close this report. And reports, that the reason I cover them is because they tie in with queries. A lot of times when people are creating queries, you can create a report off a table, but a lot of times people just want certain information, so they build the queries and then they run the report off of that. I'm going to go to the Create ribbon now. And there's 3 more queries I want to mention. And when I hit the query wizard, it's the Find Duplicates, Find Unmatched, and Crosstab Query. So in the duplicates, I'm going to do the duplicates first. Let's say that I'm going to the West Coast and I would like to contact customers who are in the same state. So I'm going to click on Find Duplicates Query Wizard, and I'm going to base it off of the customer table. And what's nice about these wizards, and if there's something you're not sure what you want, you can always, if you don't get what you want, start over, so that's the nice thing about it. I'm going to go ahead and hit next, and I'm going to do business, contact, and actually that's not what I want. Which field contains duplicate information? I actually want state. So I want to see those customers in the same state. Hit next. Now I'm going to do business, contact, city, and phone, because I want to see their name, what city they're in, their phone number, so I can call them. Then I hit next, and I'll hit finish. I didn't worry about naming it. So now I can see all of the customers that are in the same state. So if I'm going to be on the West Coast, I can, use the filter to say, okay, I just want to hit Arizona, California, maybe I want Washington, and I hit OK. So now I could print this, or I could, remember I could, create a query from this, and then I could run a report or just print it, and I have that information with me. So I looked for customers that were in the same state. Now the other type of query is the Find Unmatched query wizards. Now I want to find customers who haven't placed any orders, because I need to call them and find out, why. So I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to select the, and it'll tell you, it'll ask you, what table. I'm going to do the customer table and then the orders table, those two tables. And then of course, they have to be related in order for this to work. So that's why this is working. And you'll see that in the customer ID in the customer table is linked to the customer ID in the orders table, which is why this is able to work. We'll hit next. I want business, contact, phone. What fields do you want to see? You could send everything over, or you could just send the fields that you want to see. And then I'm going to hit finish. So these are customers who haven't placed any orders in a so I can give them a call and find out why. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. And then finally, the last type of query you have here is a Crosstab Query wizard. And basically, this is like if you've ever worked with pivot tables, you can actually, you have information where you have rows of information, you have columns, and then you have, data in the center. So let's look at the Crosstab query. And basically, what this is going to do is I'm going to base it off the orders table. So I'm going to hit next. And in the orders table, I have to determine what fields do I want to be the row. So I'm going to say, I'll say customer ID. So the customer information will be in the rows. Then I'm going to hit next. I'm going to pick order date when they orders. Because I picked a field that's a date, when I hit next, I can choose month, exact date, time, year, whatever you want. I'm going to do month. And then I want to know how many orders, total orders they had for that month. So I'm going to order ID, sum, and hit next. Now when I hit finish, oh, why didn't this one work? It worked before. I've done this before. Let's try it again. Let's say orders. Okay, I don't know what's going on here. I had no problem with this. Okay, again. Okay, customer is going to be in the row. Order date. Something with the dates that are going on here. I wonder if I should pick something out. Maybe I'll do ship state. I don't know. We'll just try this. See what at least it comes up. Okay, there we go. So if I want to know how many orders I had for the state or whatever, I have that in there. Something's going on with the date and times in this computer, and I don't know why, if it's my database or what, but it was working the other day with no problem. But anyways, but it kind of gives you an idea of, you have your information on the left. I have my customers, I have my states at the top, and I wanted to know how many orders I had, in California, how many orders I had in Florida. So it gives me that information. So I could do a sum, I can do an average, I can do a count. So and that would be a crosstab query. So I hope that this gave you some information on how to work with queries more efficiently, different things to look at like the parameter queries, just to kind of get information from your database and just kind of getting, maybe there are some things that you didn't, weren't familiar with or you wanted to learn more about. So I'm hoping that you enjoyed today's session and I appreciate you participating. I am going to ask one question before the session ends. So that whoever knows the answer, write it in the chat window and you will win a version of Windows 8.1. So the question is, what is needed when creating a parameter query? What do you need to type when you're typing up a parameter query? Besides the text, what's used in a parameter query? Does anybody know? Mark Perkins is typing. Close, but I'm looking for the actual symbols. What are those symbols that you have to type in order for the parameter query to get the pop-up box? Anybody know? Do I have to ask another question? What about a string of or statements? Does anybody remember what the beginning text was when you're typing or statements? A string of ors. It began with yes, Pam, you won. Yay. The query was the brackets. I was looking for the brackets. The brackets, actually, that's what I was looking for around the text. But Pam, you won. It is the in with the parenthesis and then the commas. So great. Thank you very much. The next session is going to be Excel VLOOKUPs, some different formulas like SUMIF, if statements, COUNTIF. We're going to look at creating name ranges and tracking workbooks. So if you're interested in that, feel free to participate. If you have any questions about today's session, go ahead and put it in the chat window. Otherwise, the session is ending and time to go. You're welcome. Thank you. And again, if you're looking for more on Access and you want some training, feel free, to contact us. We would be glad to come out and help you if you're setting up your database or just overall want to learn more about form design and report design. So thank you for participating and see you next time.